Going into this year's session with the support of House Speaker Javier Martinez, advocates were cautiously optimistic about their immigration detention reform proposal. The Dignity Not Detention bill would have barred New Mexico's cities and counties from entering into contracts with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain asylum seekers. That bill met an early end in the Senate this month, as 6 Democrats joined Republicans and another 3 vanished before the vote, to kill the bill by just 3 votes. Sophia Genovese, an attorney with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, stopped by our studio and told executive producer Jeff Proctor when she knew the bill's life would be cut short.
Sophia, thank you very much for coming, and welcome back to New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks for having me.
We just heard from Lou that Senate Bill 145, which has commonly been known as the Dignity Not Detention bill, died on the Senate floor in an incredibly narrow vote for the 2nd year in a row. And I want to get your reaction and sort of a description of how that happened. But I'd like to start with having you tell my viewers how many of these immigration detention facilities there are in New Mexico and where they're located.
Absolutely. So New Mexico has 3 immigration detention facilities. These are supposed to be operated by ICE, but instead what we do see is ICE subcontracting these responsibilities out to counties, who then subcontract those responsibilities out to private prison companies. And so New Mexico has 3 of these facilities. We have Torrance County Detention Facility, Cibola County Correctional Center, and Otero County Processing Center. In the case of Torrance and Cibola, these are both owned and operated by CoreCivic, which is a Tennessee-based private prison company. And it's really interesting, the contractual relationship. ICE contracts with the counties, who then contract with these companies. And that allows ICE to circumvent ordinary procurement requirements that you typically see in federal contracts with private corporations. By contracting with the counties, ICE gets to sidestep these responsibilities. And that goes along with, not having to look into the performance history of these companies. And so the counties are really operating as shields to accountability. And in the case of Otero County actually owns that facility, but contracts out with the private prison companies. All 3 of these facilities detain asylum seekers who've recently arrived from the southern border. Torrance and Cibola, they hold asylum-seeking men, and then in Otero, we see men and women. Again, these are recently arrived asylum seekers. Under federal law, their detention is completely discretionary. It's truly random who gets deported, who gets detained, and who gets released at the border. It's up to the discretion of Border Patrol agents. But this decision impacts lives so significantly. We see people in detention lose their cases at far greater rates than people who are not detained and able to seek asylum from the comforts of their homes and have access to holistic services. In New Mexico, there's 6 of us doing this work, 6 attorneys providing representation to detained asylum seekers to a population of about 2,000 people. That's just not enough people to ensure due process, to ensure that everyone has access to the asylum system. So as a result, we see tremendous due process violations on top of what we think are ordinary systemic prison conditions, poor conditions, inhumane conditions that people are subjected to.
That was actually going to be my next question. In New Mexico, what are these places like?
All 3 facilities are horrifically understaffed. I think that's a problem across prisons in New Mexico generally, and it's certainly the case in these 3 facilities. And that leads to a number of problems. People are subjected to prolonged periods of solitary confinement because they're simply forgotten about. We hear all the time how people are put in medical quarantine for 2 weeks and not given enough food in those time periods. The facilities themselves are struggling. There's crumbling infrastructure. There's regular sewage leaks. People in Torrance, for example, were sleeping in sewage in their dorms because they couldn't get staff out there to fix it quickly enough. There's medical deficiencies, and I think language plays a part of that barrier in accessing services. We recently had someone who is deaf who couldn't communicate his needs because there wasn't a Spanish Sign Language interpreter. And so there's a myriad of issues really, but it comes down to understaffing and a lack of accountability.
So let's talk a little bit about Senate Bill 145, the parade of horribles that you just laid out. What would that bill specifically have done to address that and this question more broadly?
SB 145 built on a movement of states saying that they would no longer be complicit in the human suffering that is systemic in ICE detention. And what it specifically does is prohibit contracts between local state entities and ICE for the purposes of civil immigration detention. These contracts are discretionary for public entities to enter into. Nothing under federal law requires public entities to be involved in civil immigration enforcement. And so SB 145 really went after those contracts to prohibit these types of agreements, to increase accountability, but really to try and get New Mexico out of the business of detaining people for civil immigration violations.
One more question before we get to what happened to the bill, just so that my viewers are crystal clear here. When you talk about asylum seekers, what does that mean legally? Are these folks who are in fact accused of committing a crime?
No, people who are crossing the border and seeking asylum are absolutely not committing any crimes. In fact, one must be within the United States jurisdiction, within our territories, to seek asylum. It's not possible to simply apply from Mexico and wait your turn in line. That's not how the law works. It requires one to actually be here. And so when one seeks asylum, says they want to file an asylum application, they are not committing a crime.
Okay, so let's get to the bill and sort of what happened to it. It really seemed, at least from where I was sitting early in the session, like the bill had some momentum this time. Were you optimistic in a way that you weren't last year? What was the messaging from the legislature and from the governor around the bill heading into the session this year?
We came into this session with so much community support. There are so many faith groups across the state, community groups across the state who galvanized and organized over the past year to support this bill, recognizing the horrors that are occurring in these facilities. And so we went into the session very confident, cautiously optimistic because it's 30 days, but we were optimistic. And we had the support of leadership, we had the support of Speaker Javier Martinez, who has made this a priority, and we felt confident. And we felt confident after our first Senate committee hearing, and after our second committee hearing, we thought we were really going to get this passed.
Tell me a little bit about what you heard during the debate on the Senate floor, and how did that change your outlook for the prospects of the bill? Was it crystal clear to you that this was going sideways again once it got to the floor?
We received indication shortly before the floor debate that some deals had been made, and what those deals were not entirely clear. But by the time we got to the floor, we knew that we had lost some votes for a variety of reasons. And the floor debate really wasn't much of a debate. It was several legislators making statements that were quite offensive and not based in fact. And so it was more performative than actual legislative work happening on the floor.
So then what happened when it came time to vote?
We knew, again, that we didn't have the votes. What we heard instead were people justifying their no votes, people who had previously been supportive, trying to say, well, it'd be better if people were detained in New Mexico because we're a welcoming state. We're much better than Texas. Or these folks need to be detained because they're military-aged men who are going to, who knows, invade the country is what essentially we were hearing on the floor. We heard a lot of racist and xenophobic remarks and things, again, that just weren't based in reality.
So the new slogan for New Mexico should be better than Texas?
That's what the justification was on the floor. And again, it's not based in reality. New Mexico has some of the worst facilities in the country. The Office of the Inspector General has twice called for the closure of Torrance County Detention Facility. This is the government's own watchdog calling for a closure of a facility. That has never happened before. That is pretty clear indication that we have some of the worst facilities here.
Why does this keep happening? Why do these bills continue to be proposed, seem like they're cruising, and then meet these incredibly razor-thin margins when they get to a floor vote? Why does this keep happening?
It's a good question, and I don't know if I have the perfect answer, but I think there's fear in communities. It's not accurate fear, but there's a fear that, oh, okay, we're going to take away jobs if we cancel these contracts, when in reality, these prisons would stay open if this bill were to pass and these facilities are all understaffed. It's probably not going to result in job loss. It's not going to result in less money coming to the counties when there's a variety of initiatives to spur economic development in the locations where these facilities are, such as the geothermal bill or SunZia, and lots of sustainable energy jobs that are making their way to these locations. So I think it's a misplaced fear that's not based in reality.
So I think a lot of viewers will be good and well familiar with congressional and executive failures at the federal level to deal with migration. Now the New Mexico legislature has refused, declined for 2 consecutive years to address these particular detention facilities. What does that say to people who land in our state and are seeking asylum?
Yeah, I think in the situation of immigration detention, state legislation is the most effective way to handle these injustices. This is a situation where the state legislature has a tremendous amount of power, more power than the congressional delegation, frankly, to do something about this, to step in and stand up for human rights. And now, you know, we have to go back to the drawing board because we know our federal advocacy is not going to work in an election year. We're not going to convince the president and Secretary Mayorkas to cancel these contracts. We've tried and they've told us absolutely not. And so we will be regrouping over the next year to really demonstrate to legislators who voted no or walked away from voting that this bill is critical to preserving human rights and ensuring that no more deaths occur in New Mexico's ICE facilities.
Where are asylum seekers to turn for either redress of grievance or for help?
There are 3 organizations providing services to people in detention, and we do our best to monitor human rights abuses. My organization, we're in these facilities weekly, and we submit complaint after complaint to the oversight agencies in the federal government. And the oversight agencies, I think, are sympathetic. As I mentioned earlier, the Office of Inspector General has called for the closure of Torrance twice, but at the end of the day, they don't have any enforcement authority. The only people who can cancel these contracts at the federal level are Secretary Mayorkas and President Biden. And so we will continue to uplift these complaints, but we need the New Mexico legislature to step in because it's clear the executive will not.
I assume we'll see this bill again next year, Sophia.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to me about this today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.